If you passed your rules and regulation examination, you had a trial run on the footplate under the supervision of an inspector. If you also passed that test, you were officially made up to a passed cleaner.
And then in the afternoon you'd go out on a run to see how you could manage. But there was no system to say that, oh, he's ready for passing out. But as I say, a lot got rejected because they didn't know enough. It was down to yourself. The more enthusiasm you got, the more you learned.
They used to say there is no substitute for experience. That was the standard railway saying. Quite often these old men on the bank engines, when they knew you were interested, as I was, I lived for it, they used to do what they called jerry damper and whistle. So that meant they opened and shut the damper, they put the injector on and off, and they blew the whistle. And you did everything else. You drove and you fired. Now that's the strange thing. I never felt I was being put on. I used to love it. Fill the box up, get some shunting done, bank a train up to Bibbington's, back to Buxton, more shunting, this sort of thing. It was wonderful.
Only when you've passed out for firing, a driver could ask you to move an engine, maybe just move it up a yard or two or something like that, until you gain the experience. And after that, if a driver got confidence in you, he'd let you take over and he would do the firing. And that's, of course, how you got your experience in those days.
Probably just in the marshalling yard and up and down all night. If a fireman was on holiday, the top rate cleaner would take the lowest job. You wouldn't get the cream of the job straight away.
It was an apprenticeship, but it wasn't called one. It was just one great big learning curve. Steam raising came after you were passed out for firing, when you knew how to use injectors and when you knew about testing water gauges. And then you were introduced to this glorious Sunday afternoon performance of lighting up. Well, you went round with the steam risers. They were nearly all old men, and you used to have to put these injectors on. They'd be the live steam injectors that we used on the shed while the engine was low in steam. And eventually you learned how to do it. And it's like any other thing, the more you did it, well, you just simply got more competent. So quite often you were sent for and they wanted you to come 2 o'clock Sunday afternoon steam rising. First job you had to do was look in the firebox, make sure all the fire bars were in position. There have been 1 or 2 spectacular light-ups with a great lot of fire bars missing, but you had to look in the box. You then checked the water level in the gauge glass, and you would have to see that there was at least half a boiler full of water before you started your lighting up operations. And then you boxed it round. This meant shoveling coal in to cover the bare fire bars. When you got a good covering of coal, you then put your shovel inside the firebox and you scraped a small hole in that coal which bared the bars. Now the firelighters consisted of a circular bundle of sticks with sawdust in the middle. It was like a candle grease on them. So you put them on your shovel. I think it was 3 we used to use. You put the shovel in the fire hole door, you lit them, and there was always a draft through a fire hole door. Got them going and dropped them into this little space that you'd made in the coal. And once they got going, you carefully cobbled up round them. Then the last thing you did was you opened the damper, shut the doors, and the smoke used to roll out onto the footplate. It was ghastly. And then you moved on to the next engine. And if there were 35 engines to light up, you were very busy. So, obviously, the earliest engine off the shed Monday morning was the engine you lit up first. The foreman gave you a list, went through them in order. So, shall we say, when you'd done about 12.5, you had to go back to the first ones you'd done because they would be ready for the fires to be made up. Well, you had to shut the damper first. The fire hole doors were red hot and hung in soot. It was a good job to have a pair of gloves on that game. You used to open the fire hole door. If you got an engine fitted with a flap, you were better put the flap up to reduce the hole a bit, because everything used to come back onto the footplate, the flames and the lot, and you put more coal on. So when you've been round your first charges, you then had to get on with the second lot that you had to light up. And you were busy. You're learning all the time, and you soon learnt by your own mistakes. Like opening the fire hole doors before you'd shut the damper, you soon found out which way the flames went. And the place used to be thick with smoke. It used to be yellow. You'd have a job to see some of the first engines making steam. Probably the first couple you'd lit up just after 2 o'clock in the afternoon would be starting to sizzle. And then the 10 o'clock steam raiser, of course, he'd got the glorious task of getting the first engines off the shed with 50 pounds of steam on the clock, you see. It was heavy going. But there we are, that's what you had to do.